Hello and welcome to the Discovery Roundtable, the episode-by-episode discussion show for Star Trek Discovery from the perspective of Star Trek Online players and Foundry authors. I'm your host, Drogyn1701, and with me is my partner, Greendragoon.
It's been a long time.
As our guest tonight can attest, our returning guest, our first returning guest, PaxFederatica. This has become a cursed show for us. This is actually the third time that we're recording through this because we've discovered after recording the first two times that we didn't record any audio. Oops.
Yep, and like I said after the second time, this is starting to seem like one of Harry Mudd's time loops.
Exactly. I'm sure Dragoon is about to get just that violent with some of his equipment, or at least, theoretically, because, this is all virtual stuff. So,
this is actually the 27th loop, and I've already killed you several times.
Well, luckily we've already discussed the time loop episode, and we can move along to episodes 8 and 9. And forgive me. For some reason I always forget the name of episode 8. Vis Pacem, Bellum, and then episode 9, Into the Forest I Go. We originally decided to take a little bit of a break last time mainly because these episodes kind of flow right into each other. It's like a two-parter, basically. So it seemed the natural thing to wait and discuss them together, kind of like we did for The Vulcan Hello and Battle of the Binary Stars. So obviously this is our third time discussing them. It's kind of a shame that you all won't be able to hear the first two, but we ought to be pretty good at this now.
Yeah. Well, as I was saying, the first two times, the titles for these two episodes could just as easily have been reversed. In fact, Into the Forest I Go would probably work a lot better for the first episode than it would for the second.
Yeah.
Because there's a literal forest in this episode.
I want to say there's references in each of them, but so I guess I can kind of understand what they're going for. But yeah, it definitely does. When you take them both together, it seems like, we should have totally reversed these.
Because, of course, Vis Pacem Parabellum means if you want peace, prepare for war. And they spend a significant chunk of episode 9 preparing to go into battle. So, yeah. So let's get right into episode 8 here. It starts off with a battle. I mean, we get back to the Klingon War, which is something that I said in the previous episode that I was ready to do, was to get back to really, the nitty-gritty of the war itself. So we see the Discovery jump in and try to save another Federation ship that's under attack from Klingons, and unfortunately it is unsuccessful. So, I mean, we see that even with its big advantage, Discovery still, it's just one ship. It's not going to necessarily win every battle.
Yeah, and that's kind of one of the interesting things about Discovery, because, I mean, they do say it is a science ship, and I get the impression that its weaponry, while the ship is stated that the weaponry isn't like stellar. I mean, it's not like going to wow anybody.
Not overwhelming.
No. So despite their ability to maneuver or to any point they need to be, it's like, what do you do once you get there? Shoot a few torpedoes, hope for the best.
Yeah. I mean, maybe this type of engagement isn't necessarily what Discovery should be used for. I mean, it should be used for, like hit and run attacks, behind enemy lines, that kind of stuff.
And that may be what they do. Well, for all I know.
Yeah. What we've gotten so far from the war has been a lot of tell and not show. You hear Burnham give, summaries of things in her logs that we hear throughout a couple of different episodes. But we really don't see a lot of it until this episode. And we see them fail is one of the interesting things. Burnham and Tyler and Saru get sent down to a planet for the show's first kind of big away mission to a strange new world.
Which is probably outside Toronto. Because, of course, the show is filmed in Toronto.
At least parts of it, yes. So we're back to the joke that every alien planet just looks like another, forest in Canada.
Yeah. Well, I mean, after watching Stargate film out in those same woods so many times, it's almost kind of become its own sci-fi trope.
Mm-hmm.
Then again, maybe they'll start filming more distant location shots with their bigger budget that they got. Because remember in the Vulcan Hello, they filmed that opening scene in Jordan.
That's right. Yeah.
I think
It would be nice to see them really branch out like that.
Yeah, I suspect that was kind of like a showpiece of like, this is the first episode. That's big. Wow.
And it was, I think it accomplished that. I thought it was a pretty cool sequence. Yeah. You almost wonder though, because it was pretty short. So you almost wonder, one of the things that I predicted, which has not come to pass, among many of these things that has not come to pass, is I thought we'd be getting more flashbacks. I thought it'd be almost taken like a format like Arrow does, where there's flashbacks in every episode and they sort of, inform and teach you lessons about what's going on in the present. I thought there would be a lot more of that. We saw a couple of those in the first 2 episodes, and then really we have not seen any of that since.
Yeah.
But maybe there will be more in the last half of the season.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I want to say it's almost a bit of a shame that we haven't gotten to see more of JoJo, because she was such a good character.
Yeah.
Definitely, yeah. And, and obviously a high-profile actor as well. In fact, I was just watching her James Bond movie over the last weekend.
Yep.
Tomorrow Never Dies.
Twitter.
So what we have here with this episode is it's very much a Saru-focused episode. Probably the biggest and best material we've had for him so far in the show.
Yeah, and it's
kind of long overdue development, not only of his character, but kind of his whole species.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's kind of been taking a back seat.
And we really learn a lot about him and his species through this episode because, of course, they go to this planet not realizing essentially that there is a sentient species of some sort there. It's a little nebulous, but it seems like it's almost the whole planet is a part of this. It's like maybe one big organism, but it's sentient in some way.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly not. It's not life as we know it, Jim.
Which is kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, we like to see Discovery branching out in sort of the sci-fi areas of it.
And the animators got to play with particle effects.
Yeah. They got some good Vis effects people on the show, I have to say. They're doing great with that stuff.
Yeah, I think overall it's been pretty solid, especially for...
Well, it certainly should be. It has the budget.
And apparently it's making it back.
Well, we certainly hope so.
Yep.
One of the interesting things, I think it was this past week or the week before, I have a Twitter friend who does a lot of polls about various things, what's been your favorite episode and all that kind of stuff. And she did a poll about, asking how many people were going to cancel their CBS All Access subscriptions during this break between episodes. And overwhelmingly, the majority of people are not going to, who responded to this poll.
Which
now, obviously, a lot of those fans are hardcore Trekkies, But, I guess there's enough other interesting stuff on CBS All Access that, you're okay carrying on a couple of months where there's no new Star Trek.
Including all the old Star Trek series.
Yeah, I mean, all those are on it. I'm using it to watch NCIS and NCIS New Orleans. So we still got new episodes of those releasing right now. So I'm perfectly fine carrying on. Now, during the break between season 1 and season 2, that, if there's no new episodes for the other shows I watch, I might cancel during then just to, save a few bucks.
Yeah, so I'm definitely I'll probably cancel for December and then pick it up again in January. But I mean, honestly, Discovery is the only show I watch on All Access.
But I feel like I've got my money's worth.
Yeah,
so,
same here. And I switched to the commercial-free version. I
did too, and it's strange. I was hearing some reports of people getting commercials with that, but I never have seen one.
No, neither have I.
So I don't know what's going on there. Maybe people didn't sign up for the version they thought they were.
Let's see, I'm cheap and still have the commercial version.
Okay, so I'm curious about this. So, during your average viewing of Discovery, how many commercials do you get?
I don't know. It's probably about 5 commercial breaks. I'd say probably an average about 3, maybe 4 commercials.
So it's almost like you were watching it broadcast on a network.
Although, in fairness, broadcast TV has gotten very commercial heavy in recent years.
I don't even have regular TV anymore. I'm full cord cutter. So.
Well, I am too, but I mean, I have one of those streaming only cables.
But as regular viewers of our shows will know that we go on tangents sometimes, and obviously we have gone on one here. So getting back to the episode,
To the forest we go.
Into the forest we go. before the episode that actually has that title. Basically, the plot here is that Burnham and Tyler and Saru are going to have to modify this big alien crystal structure to resonate in a certain way, so they can see through the Klingon cloak. I mean, that's their whole idea, is to get rid of that advantage that the Klingons have. Unfortunately, Saru finds himself able to communicate with the Pavans, and they kind of influence him. They take away his fear, which, as we find out, is a central thing to his race and their psychological state, is fear. And you take that away, and it's just a transformative thing for him.
But I mean,
so much so that
it's kind of cool that they play this off, that he is, because they assume for the longest time that he's under their influence or that they're controlling him, and so they treat the situation that way. And it's not only at the end when it's really revealed that no, in fact, they weren't controlling him. It's just that when they tried to help him, it altered him in such a way that it really shifted his priorities.
Yeah. You in our previous unsuccessful recordings, you likened it to what Cybok does in Star Trek V. You take away people's pain and it alters them, because pain is such a huge part of what we are and how we think. And so if you take that away, it is a drastic change. And for Saru, if you take away his fear, that is a very drastic change. And it's something he doesn't want to give up, that absence of fear. And so he, kind of under the influence of these aliens, turns on the others and tries to stop them from completing their mission.
And we kind of learn just how powerful the being Saru actually is, which you don't
Yes,
really get
indeed.
to see because he's usually very timid.
Wouldn't hurt a fly, almost. Yeah, I mean, this is the first action we've seen him get into, and he's like a gazelle or something. He's like a horse. He can fight. He can run very fast, which was an interesting special effect. Obviously, you got Doug Jones, who is a master actor and a master creature actor, doing this and running in these very strange boots that make it so that he's basically on tiptoe, like how a dog's leg works. Digigrade, that's what it is. And then they also use some effects to speed it up and that sort of thing. Is so he runs really, really fast, and then horse kicks Burnham right in the chest, which has got to hurt.
Yep.
Knocks her down for the count. But then luckily Tyler shows up, and they do eventually. He destroys the equipment, so they're not actually able to complete their mission. And the Pavans decide, in their infinite wisdom or infinite naivete, that they want to actually contact the Klingons and bring the Klingons here and try to bring an end to the conflict, not realizing that the Klingons are not going to go for that. They're going to, destroy or enslave these guys or something. Exploit them for sure, if not destroy them.
Yeah.
Is it kind of weird that the Pavans sort of represent the Federation ideal at its purest
A little
form?
bit like the sort of extreme version of, peace at all costs.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know if it's so much that they're at all costs where they're sacrificing something for peace, but that it's this ultimate.
They don't know any better.
They don't know. I mean, yeah, it's naivety. They don't know any better. But it's that sort of like, we want all to coexist and be happy, and that's kind of what the core of the Federation is. I mean, it's kind of what the Federation strives to achieve on some level.
Mm-hmm.
I think, Pax, you described them as sort of like a natural version of the Borg.
Yeah, or at least insofar as the whole planet is seems to be one ginormous sentient being.
There's some sort of collective intelligence,
I've seen a fan theory on the internet that the crystal structure is actually sort of would eventually escape and become the crystalline entity. Of course, we never got to see that episode.
There's an idea. Maybe that's something that Star Trek Online could explore. Give us Pavo as the origin point for the crystalline entity, which has, obviously been a constant thorn in our sides, and a constant source of great dilithium. At least for me.
That would be a great ground adventure zone for the game eventually.
To go to Pavo.
Yeah.
Maybe there's something, in the intervening 200 years or whatever between Discovery and Star Trek Online. Maybe something happened on Pavo to turn them evil, and that that's, the crystalline entity was a piece of the planet or a piece of the organisms that escaped to wreak
Maybe
havoc.
the crystalline entity is their ship.
Could be a ship. Yeah.
I mean, if the planet's a single entity, then the crystalline entity kind of being their ship and themselves at the same time kind of makes sense.
I like this idea.
Foundry mission material.
Yeah, Foundry mission material. There you go.
Once we get that back.
I think I also commented in one of our other aborted attempts at this that I thought an interesting idea for Foundry authors would be to tell some other tales from this Klingon war, because I mean we're obviously only seeing a small part of it and only from Discovery's perspective. So there's obviously going to be more engagements and more heroics, more horrible defeats, all of that stuff going on elsewhere that we could depict when we get Discovery stuff in the Foundry.
And what you had the cool idea of doing it as a holodeck program, so that people can do like a series of holodeck programs about the Klingon War.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I've always thought the holodeck was a little underutilized in Star Trek Online. It could be a good opportunity for us to use it. So there's more to this episode, obviously, than just the stuff on the planet. There's a B and a C plot line. The B plot line takes place on the Klingon sarcophagus ship, where L'Rell has decided to sort of insert her way into the interrogation process of Admiral Cornwell, so that she can maneuver things to get some alone time with her. Because apparently Klingons must not have video surveillance or anything like that. And she approaches the Admiral and says, "I want to defect. I'll get you out of here if we can defect." And it's interesting because she asks how the Federation treats their prisoners. Because, of course, we know how the Klingons do. And it's not very well.
I get the strong impression that L'Rell is not like other Klingons. I think part of that has to do with her intelligence background. But she...
The house that she comes from.
House Peg?
Is like a house of spies. Yeah, it's the precursors to House Peg.
Kind of a Tolkien-esque name.
Okay. So she tries to basically, I think they're in the process of trying to get off the ship, stage of prison break there, when they're discovered, and she basically has to knock down the Admiral and pretend that she killed her. No, I've asked this twice now, so I'll ask it a third time. Did you guys buy into, the idea that the Admiral was dead?
Nope, not for a sec.
Nope.
Story doesn't make any sense if that's the case.
But it seemed like they wanted us to think she was.
Yeah, and I'm going to say that.
I mean, that doesn't always work.
This part of the episode was the weaker part, and because it really is just set up for next week, and really requires next week in order to be a cohesive story.
And the C plotline is some interactions between Stamets and Tilly, and Stamets is back to his old self, which, of course, he obviously changed quite a lot since he started being pumped full of spores. And so changing back to his old self is a kind of a warning sign that something bad is going on.
And then he refers to Tilly as captain.
Yeah, which was strange. Getting a little ahead of yourself. I know she wants to be a captain, but she's got, a good 20 years left for that. But yeah, I mean, like you said, most of this, really a lot of this episode is set up for part 2, which, if you're going to do a part 1, of course you're going to set up stuff in part 2. As we well know, having all of us made Foundry mission series, first part is always set up, and then you got to do the payoff. So the first about 2/3 of the next episode is what you'd call payoff. So let's talk about Into the Forest I Go, episode 9, which basically revolves around a crazy plan, and this show really likes its crazy plans. the just crazy enough to work plans.
Isn't that kind of what Star Trek is always about?
Oh yeah.
So is in the original series, the Enterprise pulling off some crazy plan to solve the problem, routing something through the deflector dish, and having a very dynamic beam firing at an anomaly or something like that. So it's exciting beam ever.
Yeah. So somebody comes up with this random plan out of the blue and says it's our only choice.
Come up with a complicated solution and then explain it as a simple analogy.
So yeah. That of course is the age-old thing, is explain it to the audience. But in any case, they come up with this crazy plan to do a series of like 133 jumps all around the Klingon ship to gather enough data to see through the cloaking device. And of course, it hinges on somebody beaming onto the Klingon ship and planting 2 devices at either end that allow you to get the data that you need. So Stamets isn't happy with this plan, as you might expect, because, of course, he is the central component of the spore drive. Mm-hmm. So, it's like your carburetor comes to you and says, I don't think you should drive today.
Plus, we've got the whole thing that he's been lying to his partner about the...
yes, he has.
The side effects, which, of course, comes out as they're prepping for this plan.
Yeah. And it's an interesting scene where, he says, basically, I'm protecting Culber because if I tell him and he doesn't report it, he gets in trouble. And if he does report it, this whole thing gets shut down by Starfleet, who already has grave reservations about this, of using Stamets in the spore drive, as they well should.
Yeah.
But there's a nice scene in the captain's ready room where Lorca has a nice talk with Stamets and tells him about all the great things they can be doing as soon as they win the war and kind of inspires him to go with it. Which I thought was a nice scene. And, they got another one later, kind of a second part to this scene. And I've really enjoyed Lorca's sort of quiet monologues. We had one way back in Context is for Kings, where he explains what's going on to Burnham in similar terms to what he's explaining to Stamets. And I think these little scenes reveal the complexity of the character much more than, when he's making speeches on the bridge and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
They become some of my favorite scenes in the whole show.
And of course, you kind of left questioning whether or not truly genuine, trying to just be very charismatic for other reasons.
Is he really all about, we got to win this war first and then we can do all this awesome science stuff, or is he just manipulating everybody to make sure they do what he wants?
We don't know.
We don't know. The jury's still out. We might know in the next episode. I don't know. When we come back from the break. Because the show has been pretty good about, they'll set up and pay off within about 2 episodes.
Yep.
So we'll see. But in any case, they go ahead and go along with this plan. And, who has to go on the Klingon ship? Well, of course, it's Michael Burnham.
Because she volunteers for everything. I have a feeling like she was the kid's child. She was the extra credit type.
Yeah.
The sit in the front of the class, raise your hand all the time.
Remind Ranger basic.
For the record, I like to sit in the middle. I'm sure it reveals something deep in my psyche, but I don't know what it is. But in any case, you got Burnham and Tyler, and of course Burnham has to convince the captain to let her go. We sort of question what his motivation is. I think it's because he's protective of his crew, and he knows that Burnham is going to be public enemy number 1 if she goes on the Klingon ship. Dragoon has another idea. Or,
I thought my idea was I have no idea what he wants.
Your idea is that you don't know.
Yeah, well, my thought was that they have not known each other long enough for him to really form an attachment, and it's very clear that he wanted her on board even before they had met. But at the same token, I'm not sure what Burnham brings to the table that is like nowhere else in Starfleet. So what could she possibly be to him that is like irreplaceable? So yeah, it's kind of looking at it from both sides, but not finding a satisfactory answer in either case. So it boils down to I don't know. No, I need more information.
I think either there's some sort of complex motivation here that has not been revealed yet, or it's the idea that he saw something in her and how she reacted, and how she went against the captain because she thought she was right. That appealed to him because he does that all the time, and so that's why he wanted her on the ship. Or he's got some nefarious ulterior motive. But as we say a lot, we don't know yet because of this type of storytelling, this long form storytelling. So we'll find out later. But in any case, she is her and Tyler go and they beam over. They infiltrate the Klingon ship very easily, I thought.
Well, they basically just beamed aboard as soon as they uncloaked, right? While their shields were still going up. Which, I mean, Star Trek's done that for attacks before. So
Oh,
doing
yeah.
it for a transport doesn't seem.
But I mean, and they're also able to, sneak around the Klingon ship with very little difficulty, it seems like. So the halls are very empty. Maybe there's a skeleton crew aboard. I don't know. But I likened it to I likened it to one of the season finales of Stargate, where they infiltrate a Goa'uld ship and are basically able to run around it for hours without anybody knowing that they're there.
Yeah. Well, they had to fill 2 full episodes with them running around a ship.
Exactly. This one didn't feel near that much amount of screen time. That's for sure. Because, I have to admire the pacing of Star Trek Discovery. It really moves at a pretty fast clip, as opposed to a lot of the other serialized streaming shows like the Marvel shows have all been criticized for being a bit slow. Discovery is definitely kind of a hybrid model. It's not like Game of Thrones. It's not like the Marvel shows. It's really sort of its own hybrid format.
Yeah, I don't know. We talked about this. It's an interesting because the writers trying to figure out how Star Trek fits in the modern form of storytelling.
Yes, definitely. Because obviously, it's not the 90s anymore. Television has gone in a very different direction. In the same way that films have. I mean, I was having a discussion today. I watched a bunch of James Bond movies over the weekend, and Die Another Day, which was the last Pierce Brosnan one, actually came out exactly the same year as Star Trek Nemesis. And they're very similar in that they're sort of the end of a particular era, and the next installment in either franchise went in very different directions from those two installments.
And they were both also considered the worst of their particular eras, too.
Yes, they are. There are very good reasons why afterwards different directions were chosen. Because, movies weren't like that anymore in various ways. And television, isn't like it is back in, when Enterprise was being made or when TNG was being made. So I think you're right in that the writers for Star Trek Discovery they're experimenting in some ways. They're trying to figure out how to do Star Trek in the modern era.
Yeah, and they're going to have wins and they're going to have failings.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully they are paying attention and will kind of watch and figure out what works and what doesn't.
But also, we always liken this, this is the first season of Discovery, so we compare it to the first seasons of the other shows, which also had a lot of ups and downs, and in some cases more downs than ups. So we have Burnham and Tyler on the ship, and they plant the first beacon or whatever it is with not too much trouble, and then they find some human life signs and discover that it's Admiral Cornwell. She's alive and not very well. She can't walk. And unfortunately, there with her is Lorel. I got a little dyslexic there. And unfortunately, that is just who Tyler does not want to run into, because it triggers in him, a very, I think, realistically depicted PTSD episode, and he is near catatonic, basically, and not able to carry on. And so Burnham has to leave him there with the Admiral.
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting turn for his character. And I don't know if it's something Star Trek has really dealt with on this level.
No.
I think probably the most focus they gave to it, there's two ones that come to mind. The first is my favorite episode across all of Star Trek, which is The Wounded, with Captain Maxwell, who was, an old soldier who lost his family in war. And they dealt with it a little bit with him. And then also with Nog, when he lost his leg.
True. But neither of them went through a full-on panic attack.
No. And that may be because this is, PTSD is much more in the public consciousness now than it used to be.
Yeah.
So I think it's something that they probably wanted to do and to depict it in a way that, will be familiar to people who suffer from it and, people who know people who suffer from it. But in any case, he's left in the care of the Admiral, who, it's nice to see her do something useful.
Yes, finally. I did not like her character up until now.
I mean, at least she wasn't that crazy, like some of the other crazy admirals that we've had in Star Trek. But she was always conflicting with Captain Lorca, and was trying to shut him down.
She handled that poorly too. I don't think she
very poorly,
especially for someone whose background is in psychology.
Yes, but she uses it much more effectively here, that background, because she's able to help Tyler to some extent. But in any case, obviously it leaves Burnham on her own to try and plant the beacon on the bridge, which she does. But then, there's a delay, and she has to distract the Klingons long enough so they don't destroy Discovery before it can. The beacon is up, and they can do their jumps. So what does she do? She says, "Hi, I'm the one who killed Takuvma. Look at me. I challenge you to a duel."
Which should be also point out is we also see probably one of the first in-universe chronologically examples, the Universal Translator working.
Yes.
We finally get to hear the Klingons in English.
Which is a cool thing that the Klingons weren't familiar with that technology. It was like, how is this happening? What I really liked about this episode was the character of Cole. I thought that actor, Kenneth Mitchell, really put in a fantastic performance. He's somebody I've seen in a number of other shows. And he's very different from those shows here. But he puts in a fantastic performance, a good straight up villain performance. He's not necessarily, the complex villain, but he's more of the straight laced villain. But he was fantastic and he was interesting, and I hated to see him go later on. But he gets in a fight with Burnham, and Burnham gets in a couple of good hits, but is mainly getting her butt kicked. But that's okay. She's just buying time, and she does get Captain Georgiou's comm badge back. Well, it's not a comm badge; it's just a badge. She gets her badge back. Insignia. Yeah, badges. We don't need no stinking badges. Well, nobody's going to get that right. / toothpick.
I wonder if Vok uses a toothpick too when he was eating her.
Well, I mean, it is kind of cool though, because it kind of offers a sense of closure for Burnham, because it is in a way a reflection of the fight from the second episode.
It is. It takes place in the same place, even on the same set of walkways, on that lovely bridge set, which is no more, along with Cole. So once they have the beacon up and running, she beams out in spectacular fashion. And then, of course, Tyler and Cornwell also beam out, but L'Rell comes along for the ride in a scene reminiscent of Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home. It's kind of fun to see those little canon connections come back. And then Discovery is able to do its jumps, and they see through the cloaking device because, of course, the Klingons can't read shields when they're under cloak, and they get blown to hell.
Cole, we hardly...
Yeah, exactly. Just when he was getting interesting.
So I know we've talked about this in previous loops about the idea that Cole's death could open the way for another member of his house, namely Kor.
It could.
Yep.
But I have an addendum to make to that.
Okay. Yeah.
What if Cole or Kor turns out to be the same guy, played by the same guy except without the makeup?
Maybe that could be a thing.
It depends on whether or not Discovery is willing to acknowledge the augment virus. A whole explanation.
Yeah, and we're not certain. I think at this point that they're going to do that. But that is a very interesting idea. Although I don't see a lot of similarities off the top of my head between Kenneth Mitchell and John Colicos. But that's just I wouldn't say that any of the actors who play Sarek have been dead ringers for each other either. So. And we're up to like 4 or 5 on those. So, yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to pave a way for someone to take control of the Empire, because Cole was basically the guy, wanted to be emperor or something like that. And he's out of the way now. So, who knows what's going to happen in the back third of this season. But getting to the end of that battle basically eats up about 2/3 of the episode. So there's quite a bit of material left at the end. A lot of it is dedicated to kind of advancing the relationship between Tyler and Burnham, where he's finally able to open up to her about what happened to him in Klingon captivity. And they have a very nice scene together, I thought. And I'm really enjoying their relationship, which makes it really hard if he is actually Vogue.
Yeah, there's heartbreak.
I'm really loving him as a character.
I do too, and I too am gonna be really sorry if we lose the personality of Tyler to Vogue.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
Although if they want to make it really interesting, I mean, Tyler's personality won't go away, and it'll cause a lot of interest. If they really want to make it like some deep character stuff.
And as we mentioned in previous recordings, that would also cast doubt on the sexual assault flashbacks that we see in this episode.
Because that, and some of it seems to imply that like he is what you call a sleeper agent. He doesn't even know that he's a Klingon if he is a Klingon. And so that's maybe his memories from being a Klingon intruding and coming back. And so it's not an assault that he's remembering.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Which, I mean, does kind of make sense. I was having a hard time believing the Tyler's Vogue theory, while as the idea of Vogue pretending to be Tyler. He was too good of a Tyler to be Vogue. And so the idea that his memories have been altered makes so much more sense.
But that is another thing that we're going to have to wait to find out.
Yeah. But they were definitely ratcheting that up with like those scenes, that scene at the end between Tyler and L'Rell.
L'Rell, yeah, in the brig. It will basically be the greatest red herring in history if
he turns out to not be Vogue.
If he turns out to be not Vogue.
Yeah, I think the one thing that casts doubt on that theory is the fact that there was only 3 weeks between Vogue's last episode and Tyler's first episode, which seems a little bit short, too short a period of time maybe to undergo such a radical transformation. And again, maybe the Klingons are just that good.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if a couple of weeks would probably be more than enough time to do a surgery. Yeah, but it was far too little time for like Vogue to be trained in like the ways of humans. So
it does seem like it, yeah, to be that convincing. But on the other hand, if they just implanted memories in him, that would not take as long.
But yeah, I mean, the most interesting outcome would be if they try to awaken Vogue, but Tyler's memories don't just go away, and so yeah, you have this conflict caused essentially the personalities of Tyler and Vogue. Who
so now you'd have a Klingon who remembers this tender relationship with Burnham. That would be very interesting, and has remembers the feelings that he has for her.
You got to remember that Vogue was an outcast, so I don't think Vogue has a ton of like wonderful memories of Klingon society.
This is true.
So yeah, we'll see how it goes. I mean,
yeah, there's so many possibilities.
A lot of times they've set it up like they're going to go someplace dark and then opt instead to take it in a different direction. Yeah. So
yeah, I mean, one thing is 100% sure in the 6 episodes that we have left in the season, they are going to address what happened to Vogue.
Oh yeah,
we'll learn that no matter what it is. It's just at this point still a little hard to predict exactly how they're going to do that. And so then we come to the kind of monster at the end of this episode. So in what I think is probably one of the neatest looking scenes, you have Lorca and Stamets in the shuttle bay, looking out at the planet and having this nice little conversation. And then Stamets says, we'll do one last jump to get us back to the starbase, and then I'm done.
And when he says, the moment he said that, you knew that was going to be trouble.
Yes, they're telegraphing the hell out of it. That there's something bad's going to happen on that jump. And so, Dragoon, you went back and looked at the screen there of Lorca right before this jump.
And he definitely overrides the coordinates just before the final jump.
Although there was confusion as to whether that last jump was actually the 134th jump, but the log says it's just before the 133rd jump. So I wonder what's going on there.
Well, I mean,
we may find out, or it may just be I don't know.
Okay, so if we proceed on the thought that their wayward jump was intentional, I'm going to say that Lorca probably didn't intend to do it as soon as he did, but because Stamets said it was going to be his last jump, he kind of saw it as his one last opportunity to do whatever it is he's wanted to do.
I think you might be right about that. I mean, we find out earlier in the episode that Lorca has been basically mapping alternate dimensions through all of their spore jumps. And so he seems to be able to know how to chart a course to these. And maybe that's what he's doing, taking the opportunity, just, heck with it. Let's go. If I may never have this opportunity again, so got to do it.
Although, I mean, in a previous time loop, you had kind of commented that he seems genuinely confused about where they are at the end.
He does, yeah.
So it could be what happened is he'd meant for that last jump to go to some particular place or some particular universe. Something went wrong, and they wound up someplace completely different. So maybe they are in the mirror universe, but that's not where Lorca intended to go.
And of course, there's all kinds of fan theories about, maybe Lorca is from the mirror universe already.
I've also heard a theory that Lorca is a time traveler.
Yeah. I've also heard a theory that Lorca is Vogue.
That would be the.
Heck, I've even heard
I don't buy into that one at all.
That would be tougher to pull off. Never know. Maybe they swapped him out when he was held prisoner.
Could be. Who knows? Red herring after red herring.
Yeah.
I know.
A barrel full of herring. But in any case, something goes wrong in the jump. It obviously has a huge effect on Stamets. He collapses and his eyes go white and he starts, talking incoherently. Which I think it kind of, that was another thing that was being telegraphed, is you knew something bad was going to happen to Stamets.
Yeah.
Luckily, he's not dead.
No, and he was still alive, all the go crazy in the trailers.
Yeah, the previews for this episode.
And I'm still getting that distinct Gary Mitchell vibe out of him, especially after that.
I heard that, which is a cool connection to make. I mean, obviously, this is something that, what if the Great Barrier around the edge of the galaxy is something to do with the mycelial spore network?
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe it could be just a ginormous thicket of spores surrounding the galaxy, or a thicket of the fungus.
Yeah, interesting thought. You can pass through it, but things will happen.
So maybe people with higher Esper ratings have bits and pieces of tardigrade DNA.
Or it could just, not be a canon connection at all.
Yeah, which is probably infinitely more likely.
It's what is that rule that the simplest explanation is the most likely? The simplest explanation is they didn't, it's not a canon connection. It's just something they came up with to turn his eyes white. So yeah, I mean, it definitely leaves us on a cliffhanger. It's maybe not quite on the order of Best of Both Worlds in terms of effective cliffhangers, but still a good one.
No, it's definitely not the worst.
Yeah, we don't know where they are. We don't know if they're in the right universe. Maybe they've jumped all the way back to the Star Wars universe, and a Star Destroyer comes, across the screen.
We finally get that Star Trek Star Wars crossover everybody wants to happen.
Exactly.
As I mentioned in a previous loop on the Edge podcast, there was even a theory put forth that Discovery's been in a parallel universe all along, and now they're jumping to the Prime universe, and we're going to start seeing the more familiar designs of ships and uniforms and all that.
Yeah, unfortunately, that would be like a nightmare to try and explain on screen. That would be very confusing.
especially to people who are not that familiar with Star Trek.
Yeah.
But I've also seen people speculate that maybe they're jumping to the Kelvin timeline. I don't know what you'd really do with that, but yeah. I suppose it's a possibility.
Besides, Stowe already did it.
Yeah, we have visited the Kelvin timeline once. It was a good little episode.
Yeah.
So we have the first 9 episodes of the new Star Trek series, or New Millennium. And so what do you guys think so far?
I'm enjoying it. I mean, it's a little tough to see where things are going. I mean, in my final verdict is going to depend on how everything pays off. But it's definitely, I'd like to tune in every week, and I'm enjoying continuing to watch.
Yeah, there's still 40% of the season left, so plenty of time for things to go off the rails. But so far, as far as first seasons go, to me, this one has blown the doors off of all the other first seasons of series, except for maybe the original series.
Because the first season was their best.
Arguably, I mean, there's some real good episodes in season 2, but I'd say probably overall season 1 was definitely the best.
Although it was lacking Chekhov.
Well, not according to Khan.
So yeah. Okay. You hit across one of my buttons. I've actually thought about this a lot, and I realized that just because Chekhov is not a part of the bridge crew does not mean he was not on the Enterprise.
I think that's sort of the generally accepted explanation, is that he was part of the crew. We just hadn't really seen him yet. Maybe he hadn't graduated up to bridge officer yet, and Khan encountered him somewhere in the halls.
I think at a convention that I went to many years ago, someone put that question came up, and the theory was that they met in they met in the latrine at some point when they were both they were both going in there to relieve themselves at the same time, and that's where Khan saw Chekhov.
Ooh, maybe this is before Khan tried to take over the ship. So they meet in the head, and they're talking, and Khan feels that Chekhov needs to be bolder and encourages him to go seek out becoming part of the senior staff, and that's why he eventually ends up on the bridge in the second season.
There you go.
So that he can go on to become first officer and then meet Khan again and get an eel stuck in his ear.
It was all part of Khan's plan.
Yep.
Khan was manipulating things from the get-go. Playing the long con.
Yep.
Oh, that's a horrible pun. Okay.
We've done this a few too many times.
Yes, we have. By the third time loop.
Oh, we're up to Loopy Stamets.
It's wait for it.
Stages.
Magic. It's magic to make the sanest man go mad. So speaking of, canon connections, Discovery's gotten some flack for doing some things, especially visually, that sort of, they don't make sense with TOS. But they have said there were some blurbs from some of the producers and writers that they were going to do more with connecting it back to TOS and resolving some of that stuff.
Really?
Like in the second season. I don't know exactly what form that'll take, but maybe we'll see Constitution class flying around or something. I don't know.
Well, I mean, Discovery in of herself is pretty retro. I mean, obviously it's based off of a design from the 70s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, concept art for a show that a planned Star Trek show that never got off the ground. Sort of a Ralph McQuarrie-esque kind of a thing.
One way they could do that. One way they could do it is put forth a scene on where you're on say the bridge of a Constitution class starship, and everything's all the panels and stations and everything are in the Discovery style, the 21st century design style, except for the color palette. The color palette would mimic that of the TOS, so that could be an interesting way to sort of mask the differences between the two.
Oh, well, a funny thing is that Cage, the original pilot, did not have any of the bright colors that later show did.
It was very gray. And I just watched that recently. It's very gray.
Well, it's kind of a long way from what we've been seeing on Discovery, and the Shenzhou so far. So they could do that. They could do that too. They could just make a modern design bridge, but change the color palette to mimic that of the original of the Cage Enterprise, or
in the shape
or
as well.
Again the Kirk Enterprise.
Oh, see, I'd be kind of cool down with that. Kind of make it look like TOS if they had the budget and the ability to do CG.
Mm-hmm.
So that it kind of calls back to.
I think we have reached about the end of our time limit for this loop. So obviously we will be back after the break. We got the next episode, episode 10, which is called Despite Yourself, which is actually Jonathan Frakes' episode that he's directing, will be released on January 7th for CBS All Access people. And then I believe for all of the international Netflix people, it becomes available on Mondays, if I'm not mistaken.
And I will, as I did in the previous loops, I will just quote from my latest blog entry. For now, I would just like to congratulate and thank the Star Trek Discovery showrunners, writers, cast, and crew, not just for bringing Star Trek back to television or for adapting it to the 21st century, but for sending the new series flying out of the gate like no previous Trek series before it. Now we have 2 months in the holiday season to decompress, cool down our brains, and prepare for the wild ride promised for the season's home stretch.
And it's actually much less than 2 months now because of the time it's taken us to get this right. Because we're actually now recording this on Wednesday the 22nd, so we got like a month and a half till the next episode comes out.
Now.
Yeah.
Well, we'll resync our chronometers once we re-enter normal time.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
We'll finally discover how many loops it's actually taken us. I expect to hear Kelsey Grammer knocking on my door any minute now.
Yeah.
All right. Well, until next time, we hope you enjoy The Final Frontier.
See you guys in a couple months.
Later.